Welcome back to MMA Al Dente. I am the guy who picked Molly McCann to defeat Julia Stoliarenko. And I'm here to recap Tom Aspinall versus Marcin Tybura, the whole event. And I will start at the top with Tom Aspinall steamrolling Marcin Tybura. That's what that was. He steamrolled him, looked like, top 5 fighter, future champion, all that horse shit. He looked back to normal. This was a quick fight, which is the one thing I didn't want to see. I knew it was a possibility, of course, but I wanted to see them fight deep in round 3. I wanted to see how he looked against a guy like Tybura, who, despite being limited, certainly athletically, and maybe even technically, he is a guy who will definitely be there fighting hard throughout the whole fight. He's got good cardio. And he's good everywhere. He's just maybe not great everywhere or anywhere. But Tom Aspinall might be great everywhere, for all I know, but he is a force to be reckoned with. I mean, when he's firing on all cylinders, which is in the first few minutes of round 1, he looks perfect. And this was just another example of Tom Aspinall being perfect. He's taken out many good fighters like this. I guess most impressively is Sergey Spivak, but this is just another guy who is historically a pretty tough fight for a lot of great heavyweights, and Tom Aspinall made quick work of him. He was too fast and too powerful, and that was the difference. That's all it took, the speed and the power. And Tom Aspinall threw a nice combination and a big right hand at the end of it, and sat Marcin Tybura on his ass. Or maybe it was just the 1-2 that got him down after the combination. I don't remember. Either way, Tom Aspinall steamrolled him. Wasn't much of a fight. Marcin Tybura, this was, even though it was the expected result, it's definitely a shit loss. Another strike against his durability. I believe this is 5 losses via knockout. I could be wrong. But, yeah, despite this fight making sense, it's still a strike against his durability. It sucked. But, yeah, for Tom Aspinall, he's got all the glory, and this guy, he's back as a contender, in my opinion. That Curtis Blades fight was supposed to be a big fight, and it's like it never happened, even though it took a year off his career. But Tom Aspinall, yeah, he's back in that spot. I want to see him fight one of the very best heavyweights, and if somebody gets injured or whatever the fuck, I want to see him fighting for the title. He's very much in that realm already. So, great win for him. Julia Stoliarenko, took out Molly McCann with an armbar in round 1. This was just an example of Julia being that Ronda Rousey. She's a first-round armbar monster, which, of course, if you bet on it, congrats to you, plus 750 round 1. That's her path to victory pretty much in every fight. So you see, even slightly better odds on her money line. It's probably worth betting on it, and certainly some big odds like that. And she got it done. I knew she had a grappling advantage, but I thought she would not be able to get Molly out of there, and Molly would wear her down over the course of the fight, which may well have happened, but Stoliarenko found that arm and forced a tap very early, very quickly once she got the fight to the ground, at whatever point in the first round that was. But just another great win for Stoliarenko, and for Molly McCann, tough loss at home, co-main event. She's still got a bit of star power, but this is it for her co-main eventing days, I think, unless she puts together another winning streak. But she's a limited fighter, and here she was fighting somebody who was very capable of exposing those limits, and that's what happened here, very quickly. So, great win for Julia Stoliarenko. She looked fantastic, and she gets another finish and very impressive victory in the UFC. Keeps herself afloat. And for Molly McCann, I'm sure she's still afloat. She was just co-main eventing here. But again, this brings her down a notch or two. Or a few notches, to be frank. Great win, though, for Julia. Next, we have Nathaniel Wood beating Andre Fili. This was a really fun fight, close fight. A lot of action, knockdowns from the very beginning, big moments. But I did think Nathaniel Wood won. I thought he won, and it was a battle of the kicks versus the other strikes, like I said in the pre-fight video. And Andre Fili is a very good striker, very diverse striker, mixes shit up, always moving well, striking from any stance, every angle, But Nathaniel Wood, he's got an advantage. Despite giving up whatever it was, 5-6 inches of reach, he's got that kicking game, which can win the jousting battle, and that's what happened here. I thought he won. I thought it was pretty clear, but I still thought it was pretty close. I can't say it was in the realm of going the other way, maybe, but Wood really had a lot of success specifically in the final minute or two of that fight, which I will probably bring up the next time I'm talking about him. He showed a lot in this fight, and he got a solid victory over a very good fighter in Andre Fili, a guy that I was picking to beat Nathaniel Wood. I thought it would go down the way it went down, but I thought Andre Fili would start to pull ahead, and instead it was Nathaniel Wood. 3-0 at featherweight now. Fucking sky's the limit. I thought he was one of the more underrated bantamweight fighters in his day, and now here at featherweight, there's no underrating him. He's 3-0, and he just beat Andre Fili. So, great win for him. Another tough loss for Andre Fili. Even though he was knocked down, I still was impressed with his durability, which was one of my concerns going into the fight, because he was knocked down by Joe Anderson Brito. And Wood is not the most powerful puncher, but he's a damn good technical striker and powerful enough. And Andre Fili he held strong. His chin held strong, but he wasn't able to keep up in the end. So great win for Nathaniel Wood. Ziam versus Jai Herbert. I'm going to try to avoid saying great win for this one, because it was pretty shitty, this whole fight. But I did think Ziam won. I thought Ziam outpointed Jai. A couple of rounds were close early on, I thought. But Ziam, I thought, won every round. Thought he won every round. Jai Herbert was better at range, I thought, early on with his boxing. And he does have good hands. But Ziam was crowding him, and Ziam was moving better as well, where I thought in the end he started doing better on the outside. Altogether, a really shitty fight, but a good enough win for Ziam. He's a guy that at the UFC level, he might be relegated to point fighter. I think if he was going to knock anybody out, it would have been Jai Herbert. But he wins on points again. Ziam keeps himself afloat, and for Jai Herbert, I don't know. I have to see where he's at. He might not be hanging around too long. But either way, this was a pretty dreadful fight. So I don't think either guy's stock is going to jump too high. Next up, we have Lerone Murphy versus Josh Culibao. This was a very good fight for Lerone Murphy. This was pretty dominant, although kind of close in the beginning, but I did think Lerone just kind of took over at some point. I thought he was winning the striking and, of course, the grappling and initiating the grappling. Won the positional battle, and a lot of that is due to physicality, which I don't want to attribute it all to physicality when I could just as easily attribute it to technique. But I did think it was pretty obvious in that fight that Culibao was just up against it physically and athletically. And Lerone Murphy, he's a guy that is perfect. Even though the Gabriel fight was close there, the Gabriel Santos fight, but he's perfect in the UFC, and he's a well-versed fighter, and hands Josh Culibao his first loss at featherweight. So this is a win that might get a lot better with age, but for now it's still a solid win, and it was a great performance. He looked really good. That brings us to Davy Grant versus Daniel Marcos. I don't know. I scored this for Davy Grant 30-27, to be honest. I thought it was close, but I thought, after the bell rang, I said, all right, if this goes Marcos' way, it's maybe not a robbery, but it's a horrible decision. And there's a distinction to be made there. I don't know. Robbery just means it shouldn't have happened. Horrible decision means, what the fuck? These judges are idiots, but all right. And that's pretty much my take on it. I thought Grant was the better fighter. I thought he lost this fight because he had a cut on his nose. He had a cut on his nose, and the guy with the blood is losing. If you don't believe me, just ask the guy with no blood on him. That's the mentality of the judges, I guess. Grant, I thought, won. I did think this was a battle of punches and kicks versus punches and knees versus low kicks. And, Grant was winning the points battle. He was getting his leg chewed up a bit, but he was the better outside striker, had much better movement. I thought he was mixing shit up and definitely won the points battle. This was, again, a fucking horrible decision in my opinion. But for Daniel Marcos, I like him as a fighter. I did think this was a pretty stiff test for his second fight. So maybe it's a blessing in disguise that he got the victory, because moving forward now, it's a pretty record. He's got a solid name under his belt, and if he turns out to be that good, then whatever, more power to him. But I thought they got this one wrong, and Davey Grant being one of my favorite fighters in the UFC, this one stings. It's pretty bad decision. Danny Roberts gets knocked out by Johnny Parsons. This was a very good fight while it lasted. I thought Danny Roberts was performing very well early on. I thought he was winning the outside battle. I thought he was roughing up Johnny Parsons. But in the end, Johnny Parsons was just a healthier fighter and powerful enough to test Danny Roberts' health. That was one of the concerns going into this fight. How healthy is he? He's significantly older, significantly more weathered, a lot more mileage, and of course, many strikes against his chin. And Johnny Parsons cracked him, got him on Queer Street, and beat him up for a while. And Danny Roberts just couldn't hang on and fell apart there at the end of the second round. Great win for Johnny Parsons. This was a very difficult test for a debut. Danny Roberts is just technically a very difficult test, but again, there were a few strikes against his durability, and nevertheless, Johnny Parsons was good enough to make that happen and test his durability. So, great win for Johnny Parsons. And for Danny Roberts, I think this is a pivotal loss, to be honest. Losing to a UFC debutante, if I can sound like a pretentious cocksucker. And that's a tough loss. Definitely his worst loss on paper in the UFC. Although there's a chance it'll age very well. So, it is what it is. Joel Alvarez beats Mark Diakese. That was a headbutt. It did happen. I don't know what the hell happened. I thought I'd, wake up and see, oh no, the fight was overturned or some shit or whatever. And there was some controversy there. But I did think Joel Alvarez was going to win the fight. And, I thought he'd win by submission. And I thought he was taking over before the headbutt. But then the headbutt happened, and you can't, in my opinion, you can't discount it, because he was fucked up from it. I mean, that was visible. He was covering up, and like he was just knocked silly. That's how he was acting, and Diakese Joel Alvarez did what he should have done. The ref didn't tell him to stop. The ref told him to go, and he went. And that guy is incredibly dangerous. Just one of the most overall dangerous fighters in any weight class. And when he had a guy half dead, he killed him, finished the job, and did it in pretty short order. So, good win for Joel Alvarez. Could have been a great win, but whatever, it is what it is. And for Diakese, just a horribly tough loss. I mean, I'm sure he's going to appeal it. And to be honest, I kind of think it should be appealed. This was just, I think it should be overturned. Whatever. Maybe I have to watch it again, but a headbutt's a headbutt. And that brings us to Mick Parkin versus Jamal Pogues. This was just one I got completely wrong. Jamal Pogues was not there for the stand-up battle of Mick Parkin, and he didn't have the wrestling and athletic advantage. I thought Mick Parkin was the quicker fighter. I thought Mick Parkin was, he was the bigger fighter, and I thought he was the sharper fighter, had much better strikes and a much better work rate overall, which, it's easier to have a better work rate when you're the better fighter, but he was the better fighter, and he just never let up. Kept his foot on the gas, and even though it went to a decision, it was kind of like a shutout for Mick Parkin. I thought it was subtly dominant. So, great win for Mick Parkin. Excellent debut. And Jamal Pogues, again, this is a loss in which he looks pretty limited as a fighter here. And maybe it's one of those fights that, of course, will make him question his move up to heavyweight, because I know he's one of those tweeners. But here he was kind of close, but definitely undersized, and he couldn't use any of those small guy advantages to his favor. Mick Parkin was just better everywhere. That brings us to Makhmed Muradov versus Bryan Barberena. This one went about how I expected it to go, but Barberena made it the distance, which I didn't really expect. Barberena, historically very tough, so I probably shouldn't have doubted his durability. But here I thought him getting older, getting slower, and going up in weight against a guy who is underrated at that weight and is a very dangerous fighter who's not going to be looking to take him down and go the Jason Witt path. I thought this would end with Bryan Barberena getting knocked silly. And he did get knocked silly, but that's not how it ended. He did get knocked silly a good bit there, and he was fucked up. But Bryan Barberena is just heart and grit and toughness and, durability. Historically, his only 2 TKO losses are to Randy Brown and Vicente Luque, and they're in the final minute, I think, of both fights. But here he survived. He made it the distance, and Makhmed Muradov, even though, like I said, he's not going to Jason Witt him, he did mix in some takedowns. And I know he wasn't just trying to slow Barberena down. He was trying to finish him, but it did slow Barberena down. And I thought it really opened up his striking. And that's where he did some of his best work in round 2. But he wasn't able to get him out of there. And instead he showed he's a versatile fighter. And he beat Bryan Barberena up, out-grappled him, just put on a great display. So, great win for him. And for Barberena, very tough loss at middleweight. I'm sure weight cutting sucks, but he's going to be up against it at middleweight against some really sharp, fast, bigger athletes. Ketlen Vieira versus Pani Kianzad. She pretty much did Jason Witt her. She took her down. Ketlen Vieira had the physicality advantage and the grappling advantage, and she wanted no part of a stand-up fight. Not that Pani Kianzad is that much more dangerous or whatever, but Ketlen Vieira knew she had an advantage over Pani, and she found that advantage early and never let up. She was able to rip her to the mat each round, but in the third round, Pani Kianzad, that was one thing I was sure of, was Pani Kianzad would win round 3, and despite it looking horrible in the first few minutes, she made it happen. I thought she turned it around and definitely won round 3. Was the much more energetic fighter down the stretch, and once she reversed position and really stuffed Ketlen Vieira's guard, I thought she landed some great ground and pound, whereas Ketlen Vieira was largely controlling more, even though she had a lot more top control, so she probably landed more strikes. But Pani Kianzad, in her small window, put in a lot of good work, but in the end, it was too little too late. Winning the third round is great. It's a nice, trait to have, and Pani Kianzad, like I broke down in the pre-fight video, she's won far more round 3s than she's lost, and Ketlen Vieira, the exact opposite, but too little too late. Ketlen Vieira, she's a tough girl, only been taken out once, and that was against one of the more powerful fighters in the division, Irene Aldana, and she was able to survive, and those first 2 rounds, she smothered Pani. So, solid victory for Ketlen Vieira, and for Pani Kianzad, solid loss. Chris Duncan versus Yanal Ashmoz. This was the Chris Duncan show. This was a fight that was pretty close for a minute or two, whatever. Yanal was landing some good strikes in the first round, but they were all singular strikes. Chris Duncan was really working very well, much better with the volume and timing, in my opinion. And he was the faster striker. The faster striker had much better movement and mixed up the grappling, got him down at the very end of the first round, which I thought pretty much sealed the deal for how the fight was going to go. And Chris Duncan took over down the stretch. This was a guy, Yanal Ashmoz, who had never been defeated. We didn't know what it was going to look like. But one thing I think we were pretty sure of was Chris Duncan is the better 15-minute fighter on paper anyway. He's a guy we can trust there, and he won. He won down the stretch. Had some good moments, but never really, not the most. Yeah, it was dominant. It was a dominant victory, especially since he won round 1. It was 30-27, and he looked really good throughout the fight. But Yanal Ashmoz, we learned something about him. His first loss, and he was losing the whole way, and he didn't go anywhere. So maybe he's the most fucking durable guy on the planet. Who knows? But one thing we do know is Chris Duncan was the better fighter. Totally outpointed him, and handed him his first loss in very impressive fashion. Speaking of which, same thing happened with Bruna Brasil versus Shauna Bannon. This was a fight where Bruna Brasil was I thought better technically and certainly athletically. She was the bigger, stronger girl. Put together a lot of great combinations, attaching kicks on the end of them. And she just schooled Shauna Bannon. Outpointed her everywhere. She showed improved defense. Bruna Brasil, there was that serious strike against her when she lost to Denise Gomez. She looked horrible. She looked pretty horrible defensively. And here she showed to have great movement. Shauna did try to go right through her a couple of times. And Bruna Brasil was circling out, not just straight back, keeping her hands up. She looked like she definitely tightened things up. And on the outside, she was the better fighter. She was the better striker, even without the athleticism. But with her athleticism and her power, which I thought she had some distinct power, especially with the kicks there, she was clearly the better fighter here. So a great win for Bruna Brasil. Shauna Bannon, I'm sure she's going to stick around, but who knows what she's going to look like. Again, it was tough to get a gauge on her from the regional scene. She only had 6 fights or whatever, and a lot of it not against great competition. So even though we don't know that much about Bruna Brasil yet, we get a better gauge of both girls here, and we'll see where they go. That brings us to Filho versus Daniel Barez. This was an awesome fight. A really awesome fight. Just a great one-rounder and a comeback. Daniel Barez had Filho almost out of there with body shots a few times, really. Just had him stunned and dropped, I believe, and really beat him up where it was looking like a one-sided fight that was going to find its finish pretty soon. And instead, Filho hung in there, but he had to bide some time multiple times when he was hurt with body shots. But he kept himself in there and then eventually clinched up once Barez was a little slower and maybe used a little too much energy. Filho got him down, and then within a minute he had him tapping out with the arm triangle. It was a very impressive turnaround. The fact that he got the finish instead of riding out the rest of the round is very impressive and says a lot about his overall danger. And again, another notch for his top game. Filho in the pre-fight video, that's what I was saying here, is even though I expected Barez to win, only a slight lean to Barez, the reason I didn't bet on it is because Filho, if he gets on top, he's the most dangerous guy in this fight when he's on top. And he cut through that guard and tapped him out in no time once he got on top. And that was after getting his ass kicked on the brink of a finish. So great win for Filho. Really, an excellent win. Excellent fight. That was, in a lot of ways, the fight of the night. I don't even know which fight won fight of the night, but, sometimes there's a bias against short fights like that, but a lot happened in a very short period of time, and that was a fucking thriller. And I really hope Barez comes back strong. This was a tough loss for him, but he still showed a lot here. And for Filho, considering this and the performance against Muhammad Mokaev, he certainly looked limited and like he was not the best striker there, but he's a very good fighter and has a lot of great traits. Great fucking event overall from beginning to end, and it's got me even more pumped for UFC 291. Like, share, subscribe, all that horse shit. Check out my other videos.